Hey guys, Carl Cooper here with OnTheBlack.com. Before we get into the Q&A, when you get a second, check out Mets Police. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll leave the link on the side. If you're watching this on OnTheBlack.com, the link will be below the video. There was a post over the weekend on Mets Police called 5 Questions for an Average Mets Fan. So I answered some questions, so check that out when you guys get a second. Okay, now to the Q&A. Today's question comes from 941. And the question is a proposed trade idea. And here's the idea. The Mets would get Harang and Phillips from the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for Oliver Perez, Luis Castillo, and Fernando Martinez. You know, it's interesting because over the last week or so, I've heard a lot of Mets fans and have had some conversations about striking a deal in one way, shape, or form with the Reds. And actually over the weekend, on my post about, which Mets players are untouchable, John D left a comment where he proposed not getting Harang, but actually getting Arroyo and Phillips in a trade. And I thought that was a pretty good trade idea that John D left. So check that out. I'll leave the link to that as well. But back to 941's question. So it's Harang and Phillips for Oliver Perez, Luis Castillo, and Fernando Martinez. So I think that there's a couple ways you have to look at this. One is financially to see if it works, and two, if the players actually work for those specific teams. So, I looked up what each player is making over the next couple years on MLB contracts. And, in short, I'll leave the link and you guys can check out the details. But in short, if my math is correct, over the next 2 to 3 years, if this trade was to get pulled off, the Mets payroll will increase by like $10 or $11 million over the next 2 or 3 years. And on the flip side of that, the Reds payroll would decrease by like $9 to $10 million over the next 3 years. Obviously, that can change a little bit. There are some club options there, some incentives in contracts and stuff like that. But, on the surface, since the Reds are trying to really dump salary, it would work from a financial standpoint because they would reduce their payroll, like I said, by about $9 or $10 million. The other day they made an announcement that they've restructured Scott Rowland's contract to give them a little bit more payroll flexibility. So they are trying to unload some players. In terms of looking at the players and seeing if they would fit with the teams, let's first look at the Mets and see what they would get in that deal. They would get Harang. Now, I'm not the biggest Harang fan out there. I think that there are other pitchers out there that can be had through free agency that, quite frankly, are better than him and that will cost less than him. There's also a pitcher on his own team who I think that would be a better fit for the Mets, and that's Arroyo. So, while Harang isn't the worst thing in the world, I don't think he's the best option if the Mets are going to make a trade. Okay, now looking at Phillips, I think that while his salary is more than Castillo's salary, actually, Phillips gives you more home runs, he gives you more stolen bases, so there would be more offensive production out of getting a second baseman like Phillips, as opposed to Castillo. On the flip side of that, let's look at what Cincinnati would get. Oliver Perez, I'll just say, his contract is really sort of what he's making over the next 2 years is almost on par with Harang. So, but Perez is just inconsistent and brutal, and I can't see why Cincinnati would want him. On the flip side of that, Luis Castillo will cost them less than what they're paying Phillips right now, so that's a salary dump there. And then if they got Fernando Martinez, he's making relatively peanuts compared to some of these other players. And I think he would fit in their team as well, too. So there's pros and cons on both sides of the fence for both teams. If I'm the Mets, I would do that trade simply because you would get rid of your probably 2 worst contracts in Oliver Perez and Castillo. Even though you would take on Harang's deal, he might be more productive as a pitcher than Perez is. So from the Mets standpoint, I would do that deal. The flip side of that, if I'm the Cincinnati Reds, I don't know if I would do that deal. I don't know if I would want to take Oliver Perez and his contract on. What I would say to the Mets if they approach me for that deal from the Cincinnati standpoint is I would say to the Mets, you keep Oliver Perez and give us maybe one or two more minor leaguers instead, and maybe we can work that deal out. So that's just my opinion sort of from both sides of the fence in this deal. I think it was an excellent question. We'll see. Like I said, there's been a lot of chatter amongst Mets fans about the Mets, should they make a trade with the Reds since the Reds are looking to dump salary, but let's see what happens. Hopefully the Mets will do something, either sign Bay, make some type of trade over the next few weeks or so. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you soon.